So maybe we can start. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're coming from. It's good to see you all today. I'm Bruce DelMonico, Assistant Dean for Admissions at the Yale School of Management. I'm joined by my fellow Assistant Dean, Laurel Grodman. The two of us lead the admissions office, and Laurel runs the admissions committee, and I'm involved with the evaluation process as well. So we're here today for the event entitled Our Best Application Advice to give you, surprisingly, our best application advice to help you prepare your best Yale SOM application. Whether you're thinking about applying in this upcoming cycle on September 10th, in a little over a month, in our January round or in April, or looking farther down the road. We're hoping to dispense some good advice to help you as you think about the process, think about the application, and prepare for the MBA process. So maybe I'll just jump in just to talk a little, just introduce myself briefly, and then I'll kick it over to Laurel to introduce herself, and then we'll be off and running. So I'm, again, Bruce DelMonico. I've been at Yale for almost 20 years in the admissions office, and actually a New Haven native, so I'm from the area. Been involved in the development and of the application over a number of years, and am excited to share what I know. I actually am a lawyer by training, so but I try not to be too lawyerly in the process. So look forward to kind of engaging both today and beyond. So with that, I'll hand it over to Laurel.
Thanks, Bruce. My name is Laurel Grodman. I too have been at Yale for nearly 20 years, although some portion of that was as a student. I went to Yale College as an undergrad, and more importantly, got my MBA from the Yale School of Management. I've spent time in both our career development office and at admissions over the past 14 years that I've been working here. And as Bruce said, during that time, I've largely been in charge of evaluation, including building our application every year, leading our admissions committee, and so on.
Great. And so we have an hour together. We'll take as much of that as we need, maybe the whole thing, maybe a little less, to get through our remarks and the information sharing. I know our colleagues Diane and Jen are on the session as well. And I think if there are any sort of chat questions or any information that they can share, links to things we talk about, they'll provide those. But otherwise, it'll be Laurel and me talking at you for the better part of the time. And the idea for today is to really, we put a lot of thought into the application, how it's constructed, what we ask, why we ask it, how we view it. And so the thought is to really kind of walk through that with you over the next hour to give you insights into the process, how we think about it, and again, as I said, hopefully help you prepare your best application. And I'll start with a little bit of history. In our application, it's not a static thing. It's evolved over the years, and we every year we sort of adjust it to try and refine it in key ways. And I would say one obvious way, we used to have 4 application essays. Then we went to 2. Now we have 1. But we're thinking about the balance. So we're not just kind of reducing things. We're adding other things. We've added in video questions and behavioral assessment, all of which we will get to in this hour. But trying to find the range of inputs that's most predictive of the outcomes we're looking to measure, which are your performance in the program, and then your potential for impact beyond. And we'll talk about that. But it continues to evolve every year. We think about what we're asking, why we're asking it, how best to elicit the information that we think is most useful to us and that is most informative of you as a candidate, and gives us the broadest and best sense of your candidacy and you as a person. So again, the last couple of years, we've added more information about entrepreneurship and more information about background information. So updating things. One example, again, that I mentioned earlier was the video questions, which, it's not just adding things. The video questions, when we introduced those, we eliminated the English language test, so the non-native English speakers didn't have to take the TOEFL or the IELTS. So we're trying to be mindful of your time, what you're going through in the process, reducing or at least managing time, managing expense on your end, because we know it's a big investment to apply to an MBA program. And we want to be, and we think of it as really kind of a dialogue between you and us. And so we want to be kind of mindful of the time that you are spending and the expense you're spending in it. So that's a little bit about the history and how we think about things. And maybe I know Laurel, as the person who leads the committee and who really is the most direct impact in structuring and constructing the application, could talk a little bit about the philosophy behind that.
Sure. So I think about the application process as both what we ask of you, so the content of the application itself, and then how we receive and interpret that application. And both of those kind of sides of the coin all revolve around us trying to zero in on the things that are predictive of the outcomes that matter. So we are interested in understanding your predicting how you'll perform in the classroom, predicting your potential for professional success and your propensity to contribute to the communities that you're a part of. And so as we construct the application and as we're reviewing of it, those are really the three fundamental things that every element of the application contributes to one or more of. Again, your academic, your ability to thrive in an academically rigorous environment, your likelihood of being able to achieve professional success, both as a leader and as a collaborator in the professional environments that you'll be a part of. And then, more broadly speaking, what you'll bring to both our community as well as the communities and organizations that you're a part of throughout your entire lives. And so with that, like I said, we're collecting pieces of information that help us understand one or more of those things about your past as the best predictor of how you'll achieve those results in the future. And we engage in what's called as holistic review, which you've probably heard of before. But as I think about that concept, it means that we're looking at all of the elements of your application in tandem. All of it is relevant. There isn't specific weight that's given to each portion of it, and then we sort of sum it all up in some way. How we interpret each piece of your application it can be dependent on the other pieces of your application. So as a concrete example of that, how much weight we give to a test score will depend on the rest of your academic information or your professional background. So we'll rely more on the quantitative section, for instance, of your GMAT or your GRE, if you've had less exposure to that in your undergraduate experiences, or if quantitative concepts aren't sort of a ready part of your day-to-day professional work. So, there isn't one given weight to the quantitative portion of your testing. It really does rely on the holistic review of all your application elements. And then even taking sort of a further step back, we're looking to assemble a class across a range of dimensions, backgrounds, experiences, perspectives, geography, demographic elements, you name it. And so with that, there is no one ideal profile that we're looking at. Again, we're looking at all the information that we receive from you holistically. So I think that's sort of in a nutshell the overarching philosophy that we take in approaching the application process.
Oh, thank you. Hopefully that gives good context, good level setting. And what we'd like to do now is maybe sort of dive a little more deeply into the application and touch on some key elements and give us some thoughts about how we see it and how we think, advice on how you might want to approach it. Start maybe with some more general questions, some common questions we often get, and then we'll go into the specific sections. And then because we have some New Haven knowledge as well, I'm a native, Laurel is a longstanding New Havener as well. We kind of would share a few of some New Haven favorites. Because when you come to Yale, it's not a city on a hill. It's a school within the city, and there's a lot of interaction between Yale and New Haven. So, and you will be downtown. You'll be doing things during your time at Yale. So we thought maybe we never too early to start dispensing with some New Haven advice as well, which is always a favorite pastime of those of us who are here in town. But before that, maybe we can start. We'll go back and forth and maybe ask some general questions and then some section specific questions. Maybe starting with Laurel. More broadly, how do we read an application? What's the process for that like?
Oh, sorry, I apologize. I think my internet glitched for a second, but I think the question was, how do we read an application, or what the mechanics are of that?
Yes. Sorry, I think I might have frozen. I apologize.
So there is not one set prescriptive path that everyone on our committee who reads applications must follow, but I'll say we do sort of tee up your application in our, the reader that we use to review them in a specific order. And I suspect most people roughly follow that order, although there is some discretion to it. Your academic information, well, actually, I should say we start just with an overview of your sort of basic information, the things that you fill out on sort of your personal information page, just to get a grounding in who it is that we're looking at. followed by kind of academic information, your transcripts, all of the questions we ask within our academic section, your testing kind of comes next. Then a lot of your professional information starts to come into play, your work experience, your resume, your letters of recommendation, which by and large will speak to your professional abilities as well. And then sort of rounding out after that come things like your activities, the essay. We do actually have a requirement that that when we're reading your application, the video questions come at the very end. That is, I think, so as not to introduce all the biases that can kick into play when you're actually hearing someone and seeing someone. We make sure to reserve that as the very last step of the process. But otherwise, that's roughly kind of the order that readers see things in. And again, they will kind of use discretion about where it makes sense to kind of jump within an application based on that holistic idea. If they feel like they need some more information to make heads and tails of an academic experience, for instance, they might jump to your resume. All right. So my question to you to kick it off is, how do we evaluate fit when reviewing an application?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would actually before getting to that, I would note that so Jen and Diana put a link to our application guide in the chat. And I think that's a great resource that hopefully we provide lots of information here. That will also provide lots of comprehensive information and a great resource for you as you're putting together your application. In addition to, I'll say this at the end, but welcome you to join us for other events. I have office hours. We have Q&As and other workshops as you're working on your application. And I do see lots of questions in the Q&A, and I'm hoping, I know Jen and Diane are trying to get through those if they're not able to get to your question, because I see lots of good ones. Definitely feel free to reach out to us afterwards and we can follow up in that context as well. But so that was a little preface, but getting to the question about fit, how do we review fit in the application? And this is a kind of a quasi, I guess, trick question, because we don't try to evaluate fit in the review process, which isn't to mean we're not trying to bring in students who aren't aligned with our mission to educate leaders for business and society. That is very much who we hope will be here and who does end up here as students. So it's a very mission oriented and very, the student body is very mission aligned in that regard. But we don't see ourselves as the strict gatekeepers of that mission alignment. And we think about the evaluation phase, our decision making, as sitting within the larger admissions context of kind of what we call recruiting on the front end. So, talking to candidates before they've applied, and then speaking with candidates after they've been admitted, and making the decision whether to enroll. And what we see our job as educating everybody about the school, about the mission, about the values, what the community is like, both on the front end and on the back end, so that there can be more of a matching process. This is, I guess, maybe one aspect of the dialogue, broader aspect of the dialogue I referred to earlier. I mean, there's a dialogue in the evaluation process, but more broadly about what the school is about what life is like here, what we value in our students. And it's as much you deciding where you want to be as it is us kind of selecting and choosing who comes and who doesn't. So we care about certain qualities that are relevant to the school, to the mission, and we will often talk about things like broad-mindedness or intellectual curiosity, but we're not trying to make a hard determination on fit, which also, from a consistency standpoint, we talk about this as well. We want to be fair and consistent in our evaluation process, and things that are kind of squishier and less structured tend to allow for sort of bias and inconsistency to seep in. So we try to work against that in our process. I didn't mention that necessarily as much in the app construction piece, but that's an important part of it as well. So that's how I would talk about fit, and again, how we think about it. And I guess kind of to return the questioning to you, Laurel, does for candidates, does showing interest, like visiting campus or attending events or getting an alumni recommendation, does that help your chances of being admitted to the school?
Yeah, and that's I think a good follow-up question to the fit piece. So I'll start by saying those things are incredibly important for you to do for your own sake. And it doesn't have to be every single one of those. Not everyone has sort of the opportunity to visit campus or to connect with an alum, and that's totally fine. But doing your research and being ready to make that fit decision for yourself when hopefully that admissions decision comes your way is incredibly important. So I'd absolutely encourage you to make connections with our community, with our campus, wherever possible. But it will absolutely have no impact on your admissions decision. We don't see any of that information when we're reviewing an application. Is intentionally sort of blinded from anything that we're doing. So all those activities are for your own benefit, but are not being sort of tracked on our end as an indicator of how eager you want to be here or anything like that. All right, a much more sort of practical matter. So we're probably about a month away, almost to the day from our round 1 deadline. Does it matter if I apply in round 1 or round 2?
Yeah, no, that's a question we get a lot. And the short answer is no. And then I'll elaborate a little bit. So yeah, so the first round deadline is coming up about a month on September 10th. The second deadline is, I think, is it January 5th? It's early January. And then we have our April deadline as well. But there really is no, there's no advantage to applying one round versus the other. I mean, there might be an advantage to you if you apply earlier, you'll get your decision earlier, you'll get your decision in early December, and that might be helpful to you. But in terms of your chances of being admitted, so we model each year, we model out each year, and we model so that the same application has roughly the same chance of being admitted, regardless of which round you apply. And so your decision about when to apply should really be guided by your consideration of when you are able to prepare your strongest application. And so if you're ready and able to apply and want to apply by September 10th, that's great. Do that. If you need extra time, if you need to, if you want to retake a test or secure your recommendations, you need more time to do that, or you want to build a little more work experience, or whatever it is, if you feel like you're not quite ready by September 10th and you need till January 5th, take that time. It's not going to disadvantage you. We definitely try to be very structured in our process. And again, this is an aspect, as I mentioned before, being sort of fair and consistent. We want to make sure that there's to take the gaming out of the system as much as possible, so that you don't have to kind of overthink, oh gosh, do I apply this time or that time, and you're having to kind of play these kind of do these mental gymnastics to figure out when the best time it is for you to apply. We try to sort of simplify it and take that out of it and make it, again, fair and consistent for as many people as possible. So don't worry about when to apply. Apply when you're ready to apply.
I didn't mention it, but what about round 3, which seems so far from now, but is an option.
Round 3 is an option too. That's in April. That's always a trickier one. I think the received wisdom is that the class is filled and you have less chance of being admitted round 3. That's not always the case. It's round 3 is just, it's more highly variable. And so what that means is that it's based on how many people are in the class from round 1 and round 2. And sometimes, and again, we model. And so sometimes we're on model. And so we have, the number of spaces we anticipate in round 3. Sometimes we have more people in the class and we have fewer spaces. Sometimes we have fewer people in the class and we have more spaces. So it could be more advantageous to you, or it could be less. It's just you don't know, because it's all dependent on how rounds 1 and 2 go. So the reason to the extent we counsel people out of round 3, it's just because of that variability. And also, there's a timing issue. We do admit everybody. Anybody's welcome to apply in round 3, domestic, international. There's still time for you to kind of be admitted in round 3 and get your visa and get here. But it's a tighter time frame, and it's obviously on your end, you just know later. But we know that there are times when, again, your plans change, or you thought you were going to apply the next cycle, but actually you want to apply sooner, so it's too late for round 2, but you want to apply round 3. There are reasons to apply in round 3. So we don't counsel against it. It's open to everybody, and it's not that there are fewer spaces, it's just more variable is the only issue. So I don't know if that sounds right, Laurel, in terms of the advice for round 3.
That's spot on. It's how good a job I do, I think, modeling for the round. So yeah, it can go any number of ways for round 3.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And so I guess another question we get is whether there's anything that automatically disqualifies someone from consideration, any kind of cutoffs or minimum thresholds or anything like that like below which you just won't be considered.
I have a real hard time thinking of anything other than sort of like radical examples that would never actually come up of like egregious behaviors. Really, no. We look at every single one of your applications. In fact, multiple sets of eyes will review every single one of your applications, just to make sure we're getting different perspectives and not missing anything. So there is no sort of threshold for some of the obvious quantitative things like scores or GPAs or anything that just makes us say, nope, we're not going further with this. So I'd say the simple answer there is no. Are there any unique aspects of the Yale application process that are worth highlighting?
Yeah, I think, I think there are a couple things that I would note, and I think they were, maybe alluded to earlier. And I think as we talk about the sections, I think after this we'll get into maybe the sections one by one and go in more detail. We'll go into those in more detail as well. But, a number of the things we ask for are similar to what other schools are asking for in terms of your academic background, your transcripts, your professional background, your resume, so the test scores, the letters of recommendation, the essay, the interview, lots of very similar. We might kind of look at them in slightly different ways, although probably largely overlapping with other schools. And again, we'll talk about those in the sections. The two things I would highlight, and like Laura, let me know if you have other things here, but the two things I would highlight would be our video questions and our behavioral assessment, which I talked about earlier, or at least mentioned earlier. Those are both things that are innovations of ours that we've kind of incorporated into the evaluation process. In both instances, the idea is to really kind of broaden the range of candidates we're looking at and really kind of expand the pool of people we can bring into Yale. The video questions, again, we'll talk about them more in detail when we'll go section by section, which we'll do next. The video questions, and these are both post submission. So after you hit submit, then you will get access to the video questions and the behavioral assessment. So they don't inform the initial submission. Video questions are 3 pre-recorded questions that we will share with you that you need to kind of respond to. And the idea is that we're looking to measure English language ability and maybe some other qualities and traits in terms of how you think extemporaneously and how you respond on your feet. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the idea was we introduced this element as a way to eliminate the need for you to take the TOEFL or the IELTS, which is the video questions take about 20-25 minutes. No preparation is really required. So that replaces a test that takes much longer to prepare for, to pay for. The video questions doesn't cost you anything. So trying to think about how to be mindful of your time and resources and get at this information more effectively and efficiently. And then the behavioral assessment, something we've partnered with ETS, the organization that runs the GRE. We'll talk about it more. It's meant to kind of supplement your academic preparation and get a better sense of for those of you it informs kind of your undergraduate record and your test scores to kind of really allow us to have a better sense of who academically kind of is prepared for the classroom and really expand the range of who those people are. And we can talk more about that later, but that's the general overview. I don't know if I'm missing more, if there's anything more to talk about now, or we can talk about this more details in a bit.
One more thing, actually, that I don't think we're going to really have opportunity to talk much about later, which is what I would probably call our background information section.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
So it's not entirely, I think, unique to Yale, although I think we've been very thoughtful in the kinds of questions that we ask there. And it's a section that comes at the end of your sort of written application, if you will. That is entirely optional, but we very much hope that you'll take advantage of the opportunity to give us some more information about yourself. And it's the contextual piece. So it's not specifically about your academics or about your work or anything like that, but helping us understand your background that may have informed the decisions that you've made around your academics or your professional experience. So we ask you about your childhood, your family upbringing, your parental level of education. It's where we get information about if you're, for instance, a first-generation college student, some more of the circumstances that may have informed your earlier years. We give you an opportunity, again, to answer a suite of questions and also sort of a supplemental kind of free-form question at the end to provide any additional context around your answers. And I do think that that's an important section. It sometimes gets overlooked because it's at the very end and it's a little bit more of a sort of a yes, no, quick selection nature than some of the other parts of the application that require more. But I'd actually say it's a really important part of the application. It can be, in some cases, the glue that helps hold together the other pieces and helps us understand kind of the potential distance that you've traveled to achieve what you have achieved, and it may help provide some supplemental information to challenges that you faced along the way, or gaps that you may have in your academics or your work experience or whatever it might be. So again, I don't think we're going to dive too deep into that. I'll make a little plug for a previous event, our Inside the App Literally event, which I believe is recorded, and I do go through that section in a little bit more detail there if you have interest in getting some more specific information about that. But I do think that that's an area we've really focused on building out over the last couple of years, and then how we in turn use that as a team to help inform our decision making.
That's a great point, and good addition to the video questions behavioral assessment. That background information does, as you say, does really provide good insights to us and helps us kind of sort of contextualize and frame the application more broadly. So don't overlook it. So don't sleep on the background information, as I say. We're almost halfway through the hour, and so I think now we'd like to sort of dig a little more deeply into individual sections and maybe kind of get some more pointed advice about those sections. And then again, we have our New Haven, so I think it's probably speed round, and then some maybe final thoughts at the end, so in the next half hour. And maybe starting with what a core element is, sort of the academic section, your undergraduate record and test scores, and maybe starting just generally, what are we looking for in evaluating transcripts and test scores?
Sure. So at the highest level, it's sort of that first pillar that I mentioned earlier. If we're trying to assess your academic readiness for a rigorous program, not everyone needs to be, at the so-called top of the class. There isn't even really such a concept in SOM, but we're not looking for everyone to be an academic overperformer, if you will. But it is a challenging curriculum. It is an intensive time, particularly in the core, and we want to make sure that we're, assessing your candidacy to give you the best chance of success in that curriculum as possible. And so that, at a high level, is what we're trying to understand. Coming out of the academic information that you give us, which is largely through your transcripts and your reporting of test scores.
I know a question we often get is, how are grades and test scores weighted? What's the kind of the formula there?
Yeah, so like I said before, there really is no specific weighting there. It all really does depend on what you're giving us in each of those areas. And then I think it's important to say, when we're looking at grades, it really is not just your final GPA at the end. The very same GPA can be arrived at in many, many different pathways. And so we are looking to understand the entire sort of breadth of your academic experiences, including the courses you took. Did you challenge yourself if you're in the type of curriculum that allows for exploration and kind of intellectual curiosity in the pursuit of higher orders of knowledge? We're looking for that. I should mention, we're looking at academic curricula and transcripts from throughout the world, and we're very familiar with different academic systems, and we understand how to look at that in the context of your own academic system. And so that is also a question we get a lot, but trying to understand those, the full breadth of that academic experience. Maybe you've been to graduate school as well, but then we'll take that into consideration. It really is the full breadth of your academics. And then we'll also look at your testing. So like I said before, if you have an extremely quantitative undergraduate background, maybe the quantitative area of your testing is less important. If it's the reverse, then maybe that quantitative section is more important. Generally speaking, I would say, a weaker academic background could be buoyed by, stronger testing. That is an opportunity to provide a counterpoint, for instance, to a weaker academic background. Vice versa, if you had a very strong academic background, maybe we have to rely on the testing a little bit less because we already have the evidence. So I think we're looking to sort of triangulate this information. When I say triangulate, I'm also thinking about the data point that will come later around behavioral assessment. I think there's a few different inputs that we're looking at. So no direct weighting there.
Yeah, and I guess you kind of got at another question we often are asked, which is, what if my grades or scores, or maybe or both, are below average? What can I do to address that? And you kind of touched on that just now. Are there any other thoughts you have about how to address those scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, when you think in a literal sense, half the class is going to be below average, no matter how you slice it. I always think it's helpful to look at the ranges that we publish on our class profiles to get a sense of what the breadth of the class looks like. Even that, I would, caution against getting too worked up about the numbers, because you never know sort of where people are falling in within the various ranges. We also admit people who don't come, believe it or not, and they're not captured in the class profile. So I say don't get too hung up on those, but I think that's a good starting point to sort of assess your, where you stand. So for instance, if you're falling on the very low end of the GPA range, for instance, just as one of the data points that we share, or you're below that range, well, it doesn't mean it's impossible to get admitted, and it doesn't mean it's impossible to get admitted with a weaker test score, but it's going to be a lot more challenging. There's of your application that is really sort of through the roof on some other dimension. And so that might give you a good sense to say, if I know I'm on the weaker end of the academic range when it comes to GPA, I know I'm going to have to focus maybe even more on making sure I can demonstrate my potential through the testing. But that would be how I advise thinking about sort of the metrics there.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think just building off that a little bit, one thing, I think people do kind of get discouraged when they see that one or more of their dimensions they're sort of below the mean. And, as you say, by definition, half the people are in the class are below the mean, but also like not everybody is above the mean on everything. So there's definitely a mix. Some people are kind of below on one and above on the other, or maybe it's much more nuanced than that. So one thing I tend to tell people is don't self-select out. Like if you're in the range and you feel you're competitive in other ways, don't kind of undermatch and take yourself out of the conversation. I guess somewhat to test scores, one question we do get, and I know other schools provide test waivers, and we often get asked about our approach to test waivers. So I just want to ask about that as well.
Yeah, we do require a test score from everyone. And I hope that what I shared already, begins to give some sense of why. I think if we did have sort of hard thresholds for test scores, or we did look at it in a certain sort of weighted way, then that would be, a lot more concerning for someone who doesn't test well or doesn't feel like they are gonna, that's gonna be an upside to their application. But we do require tests because we do know it is a factor that is predictive of how you'll do in the course. Not the only factor, but if we didn't have evidence that it was predictive and valuable, we wouldn't use it. So we know it's valuable. But I think we have a well-trained team reviewing applications that knows how to look at it in context with all the other information. And there's a lot of interesting data out there that suggests that when you do kind of have a test optional policy, a lot of people end up withholding scores or not even taking the test for whom the test would have actually been a benefit for them. I don't think candidates are always the best gauge of what a helpful test score is going to be. And so I'd rather have, that really equalized across everyone and be able to have that information, especially in the case where it could be helpful, rather than self-selecting from presenting that information and just sort of trusting in the process that we're using it mindfully in conjunction with a lot of other information that we're gathering. So with that, I think maybe we'll move on from the academics. That's a lot of kind of how we're thinking about those things in context, and move on to the work experience kind of realm, and talk about kind of the things that feed into that and some common questions there. So a very common question that I get a lot, I'm sure you do too, is what if I have more or fewer than the average years of work experience? How should I present my candidacy and improve my odds for coming across well?
Yeah, no, and we get both those questions. I think people are kind of wringing their hands. Oh gosh, I have not enough experience, or gosh, I have too much experience. And I try to put people at ease. And our average number of years of work experience is about 4.5 years. And people think if they're not right there, they're at a disadvantage. But a few things I would say. One is, first of all, we have a very broad range. So probably the mid 80% for work experience is probably 2 to 7 years. But we also have people who are beyond that. We have silver scholars who have no work experience. We have people who are even fewer than 2, and people with more than 7 or more than 10. So there's a pretty broad range. The other thing I would say is, we're really focused less on counting years than on the quality of your experience and how well you've performed. We're looking to kind of bring in people who've really excelled in the workplace and really been top performers and kind of added value and had impact in what they're doing. And so we're really focused more on that than on kind of just mechanically adding up years and seeing if you hit a certain threshold or within a certain range. So from your perspective, the thing I would say is don't be too caught up on the number of years. What we tell people is it's the same question we're asking everybody. Why do you want to get an MBA, and why is now the right time? And the answer can be different depending on where you are in your professional path. Some people work for a year or two and kind of they hit a point where they say, oh gosh, I need an MBA now. To be able to get to X, Y, and Z point. Some people might be working for 7, 8 years and kind of growing and learning and developing, and then they start to plateau and they're like, oh gosh, now is when I need an MBA to be able to accelerate things or to pivot or do something else. And so that timing, the timing of the pivot or the timing of the transition can be different for everybody. And we just want to know, wherever it is, why that's so, what the motivation is for the MBA. But again, I think the thing to focus on is less the number of years, but really how well you've done, and try and highlight that in your application in terms of the kind of impact you've had, both directly through your resume and your voice, and also obviously through your recommenders.
So, especially thinking about who falls within that range of work experience that we just talked about, and thinking about what the last 5 or so years have looked like for everyone on this planet, more or less. How would you recommend explaining things like work gaps or periods of unemployment?
Yeah, so I mean, that's become sadly more of a question, and I know people have had the last several years, with the pandemic, but even beyond. It's been a challenging market. It's been challenging professionally for people, and we definitely, we first and foremost empathize with those challenges, because it's stressful and it's difficult, and we know it's not easy. And sadly, I've been around long enough that I remember the Great Recession, sort of the 07, 08, when we had similar job disruptions. And that was also really challenging, really difficult for people, very tough time. On our end, and so that goes beyond just what we're talking about now, but on our end, we did then, and we have now kind of adjusted how we look at work gaps and unemployment. And we know that we've never required linearity in your application, that you've gone from point A to point B without break, and with certainty about what you want to do. We know that people are exploring and trying different things, and have different experiences that they're learning from. But we've seen an increase in sort of those gaps, sometimes current unemployment, or more extended unemployment, or people having to cobble together multiple jobs to kind of get to where they need to go. And so we are very sensitive to that, and that we do look with I think an eye towards the environment that people are working in as we're reviewing applications, and working with, I think evaluating with empathy how your jobs, your professional lives have progressed. There is a place in the application, in terms of more nuts and bolts, there is a place in the application for you to explain work gaps of 3 months or more, and we do ask you to do that. And so there is a specific place to include that. I would say you can also, we have an optional statement as well. And if there's more that you need to explain, or more nuance to what you have experienced that is relevant to us, that's another place beyond the sort of the employment gap section of the application, for you to explain more about your situation, and where you are now and how you've gotten there.
I think, is it fair to say better to give us more detail or give us more explanation than less, right? I think we're particularly bad at making up stories, or I should say, we as humans are pretty good at making up stories, but not about getting it right in that sense. And so the more information you can give us that is the actual truth of what happened, and what it looks like from your perspective, I think that's incredibly helpful, rather than sort of leaving it up to us to guess at why there was a period of unemployment, or why you transition from one job to another. I should add that in our when you enter your work experiences too, we do ask you why you left each one. And it's not, again, there's nothing shameful, I think, about being, being downsized or having, having to move for reasons other than that you chose to. But again, it's another opportunity to help walk us through your transitions in a way that I think a static resume doesn't. And so really, I encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And as no matter how empathetic we think we are, if it's better for you to explain it and for us to have certainty than for us to kind of be trying to figure it out for ourselves and kind of risk a less generous explanation to things.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are sort of backwards looking questions.
Yeah.
So looking at the work that you've done. The other thing that we're considering in your application and that we ask you around is what you want to do next, why it is that you're, applying to get an MBA and what you want to do from there. So how detailed a plan post MBA do you need to have an effective application?
Yeah, no, so we do have a section on sort of post MBA, your post MBA plans. You don't need to, have, like a metaphysical certainty what you're going to do for the next 30 years of your life. You don't have to have it all figured out. We do want to have a sense that you have an idea for coming to get the MBA and directionally what you want to do. I think this is an area where I think there does tend to be a lot of hand wringing and a lot of concern about like, what do I say? Like, how do I approach it? What's going to be look good? What's not going to look good? I would just say that we're not making value judgments about what you want to do post MBA. We're not saying this outcome is better than this. We like consultants, but not bankers, and we like technologists, but not, people doing healthcare. We're not making those kinds of value judgments. We more want to see, how you think about and how you prepared for what you're doing or what you plan to do. It's more about the thought process that we care about, and we know it's subject to revision. We know that most people end up doing something different than they said they were going to do. So have an idea for why the MBA, have an idea for what you want to do afterwards, but don't feel like you need to kind of know for sure exactly what the rest of your career looks like. I would say this side may be more of an aside. This is where our application evolves. This is a small detail, but every year we try and get feedback and get a sense of what's working, what's not. And I think 2 years ago, the post MBA, there was a statement you could write that explains this, and it was 250 words. And the feedback we got from candidates was, gosh, that seemed like a stealth essay, and you're really trying to slip an essay in there without really calling it an essay. So we said, okay, we'll drop it down to 150 words, which we did last year. And the feedback was, gosh, this isn't enough space for us to be able to explain everything. So this year for you all, we put it at 200, and we're hoping we hit the sweet spot here in terms of the space. So it's not an essay, it's just additional information, but hopefully enough for you to explain it. I would say we also do have drop downs asking for your short-term and long-term post MBA goals. Again, don't overthink that. We're not going to be using that really to inform our decisions. That's partly for reporting, partly to understand trends. And it helps feed into obviously what you write about. It helps us understand kind of the what you've written and kind of the context in which you're writing that. But again, we're not making value judgments about what's good and what's not. It's really just more for informational purposes, and to help kind of give us some high level context.
And I think you touched upon this a little bit, but how do you define if a career shift is realistic? So if I'm a consultant at Deloitte pre-MBA and I want to be an astronaut post-MBA, how are we determining whether that's a reasonable goal?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I would start by saying vast majority of people are looking to do some sort of career pivot, whether it's sort of function in this industry, sometimes both. That's one of the reasons you get a 2-year full-time MBA, is you're really trying to kind of reposition yourself for something different going forward. And a lot of time, I think it's, you might have better numbers. I think about sort of 3/4 of people actually end up doing something different than they thought they were going to do when they started the MBA. So there's a lot of exploration, there's a lot of change, but it's helpful to have something you think you're going to do so that you can kind of pivot from that, as opposed to just kind of not knowing at all. In terms of like assessing what's realistic, we do want to get a sense that you kind of put some thought into it, that you have a sense if you're making especially the more dramatic the pivot, if you're looking to go from I don't know, sort of healthcare consulting to strategy consulting, that's not a huge pivot, and we can understand how you go from one to the other. If you want to go from consultant to astronaut, okay, what are the steps that get you there? So you need to, are you doing aerospace consulting now? Would you go from that to when you're at SOM? Would you do lots of engineering classes? Would you, afterwards, would you do something that is kind of at SpaceX, aerospace related, but not astronaut? And then would you build? So what are the steps you would take to get from A to B if there's a big gap between the two? We want to have a sense that you have some self-awareness, have done some assessment, some introspection, and know what the process looks like. We get this a lot as an aside, for example, someone who wants to go from a non-finance, say you want to go from non-finance to like private equity, venture capital. It's very difficult to do that directly, but you have to build up to it in terms of, say, going to diversified financial services and then investment banking. So knowing that you know the process, I think, is very helpful to us.
Good.
Oops, I think I muted myself. We have about 15 minutes left. As usual, I feel like we've gotten behind. We thought we were ahead, now we've gotten behind. I have a few more topics to touch on. And I think a big one, obviously, essays and recommendations. So I'd love to ask Laurel, you, because you have such a significant role in crafting the essay, especially. I'll start. We give you a choice of 3 prompts to respond to. You give one essay, but 3 possible choices. The biggest commitment you ever made, the most meaningful community you've been a part of, or the greatest challenge you've faced. So maybe a compound question. Why are these the essay questions? How do you want to think about which prompt to respond to? And are we looking for different things in each prompt? Or I guess maybe 3 questions I would ask.
Yeah, no, those are all, I think, related. So just for a little bit of history, for a long stretch, maybe 6 or 7 years, we had the biggest commitment version of this question. I think we really liked it as a team. We developed it with the idea that we wanted you to talk about something really meaningful to you and give you a lot of leeway to do that. We, as we've talked about at various points today, we think that the biggest predictors of future outcomes are past behaviors. And so it gave you an opportunity to talk about how you approach something really meaningful that you've committed to, and for you to identify that and, again, sort of talk about that approach and help us understand the behaviors behind that commitment. And I think this worked out really well for the most part. But I think having had opportunity to review many of these over the years, we realized, I think it maybe like 80% of the time, it helped people identify that thing that was really meaningful to them. And in maybe 20% of the time, it kind of had to wedge that into the prompt a little bit. People desired to talk about something else that mattered to them, but it didn't quite fit the prompt that we were sharing. So the idea here really was just to expand the opportunities for you to frame that chance to talk about something that's really meaningful to you, and whether that has been a commitment, or whether it's been a community that you've been a part of, or whether it's a challenge that you've faced. We want to give you the framework to address that really meaningful thing in whichever way makes the most sense. So with that, I would say we're topic agnostic. There is no preference about which kind of entry point you go into that discussion with. They're all equally good. It's which one fits that, which one fits that thing that you want to talk about. And so in advising how to think about it, I would really ask yourself that question: what matters to me most? What is the thing that I feel like my application would be incomplete if I didn't have a chance to kind of put that forward? And my guess is there's probably 2 to 4 things that come to mind immediately for you. Pick the one that you feel most comfortable writing about. Again, thinking about, you're going to want to introduce why you picked that thing, but even more important, what are the actions and behaviors over time that you've taken to support that thing? And whichever one of those ideas that come to mind that feel like it lends itself best to that, that's going to be the one that you're most comfortable writing about. So in a sense, we're really not looking for different things in each prompt. We were looking for, again, a brief rationale for why that's the thing that you picked. We're, again, not really looking to make value judgments about, or is there a better or worse commitment or community or anything like that. But really, what are the actions that supported that behavior, or supported that thing that matters to you? And each of the questions has a couple of brief sort of follow-up guide questions afterwards. I would take those as sort of useful prompts for how to think about answering the question. So make sure you read through those as well. The one thing maybe I'll call out specifically about the challenge question is we very specifically and intentionally worded it not to be a challenge overcome. Sometimes that's a much more limiting framework, I think. Frankly, we all have challenges in our lives that are ongoing or never really going to be overcome. They're just things that we live with, and we didn't want to limit it to give us a nice success story. It's great if that's the way something that worked out, but what we're really looking to understand is just you cope with difficulty if that difficulty or that challenge has been a really central part of your life. So that's the one maybe specific thing I'd call out about that prompt.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Quick follow-up. One question we get often is, should I write about something? Can I write about something personal? Does it need to be professional? Like what's fair game for the essay?
Yeah. So one isn't inherently better than the other. We don't have a preference. It isn't that one is going to produce a greater essay. What I always challenge you to think about is, am I supplementing the information that I've already presented in my application with something else? And, frankly, we ask for a fair bit of professional information already from your application, both from your perspective and from your recommender's perspective. So I always challenge you to think about, is there something in the non-professional realm that I haven't had an opportunity to address that I want to? And it's totally fine if the answer is no. And it's totally fine. Sometimes these things aren't so discrete. Your personal passions may have driven your professional, path or aspirations for the future. So these aren't always so distinct, but that would be just the thought exercise I'd encourage you to do.
Yeah, but both are fair game. It's just, go through that exercise to determine which. Another question I think we get a lot is, do I need to, or should I discuss why Yale or why an MBA in the essay? Should I connect it to those things?
Yeah, I will very clearly state, no, that is not a covert goal of our posing these questions. How are you going to connect this all back to Yale? 500 words, which is your word limit, goes quickly. I wouldn't spend that real estate on something that we're not asking you. If this all very organically fits into why you're sitting here putting together this application to go to business school, or why you're hoping to go to Yale, then if you want to include that information and it's organic, it's fine. But that is absolutely not why we're asking the question. There's no expectation that there's anything Yale oriented in there.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And you've covered a good bit with essays. Any other kind of general essay question guidance that you would throw out there?
Really nothing beyond the obvious of, you want to make sure it's low-hanging fruit. Make sure your essay doesn't have typos or doesn't have, grammatical errors. The one thing maybe I'll mention in here is we did provide some guidance for the first time this year around the use of AI. I will say, if I had to quickly summarize it, it's that we're not going to prohibit you from using AI for assistance the way that you would use kind of a trusted friend. So think about using it to help ideate, to help refine ideas. Certainly, for basic things like spell check at the end, it's fine, but the content needs to be yours. It's not meant to be generated by a friend, and it's not meant to be generated from AI. So I think that's a helpful framing to have in mind. So with that, I think we could turn over maybe to the two kind of parts that come after the application, the video questions and the behavioral assessment. I think you actually gave a really good description already of the video questions in the earlier portion. I don't know if maybe you just want to take a moment to describe what the behavioral assessment is and how we use it.
Yeah, no, I'll try and go quickly. I know we're a little short on time. I want to make sure we get through it all. So the video questions I talked about, the 3 questions that are pre-recorded, you sort of respond to them sort of in the moment. After the fact, we'll give you a link to the for the Kira platform afterwards. Take about 20-25 minutes. Behavioral assessment, similar time frame in the sense that it takes about 25 minutes to complete. It's something we developed with ETS. As I said, it's I don't know if I actually said this. It's unlike a GMAT or GRE that it's cognitive in nature. This is non-cognitive. It's not an EQ. It's not emotional intelligence. It's not a soft skills test. It actually measures a set of intra and interpersonal competencies that help inform actually our academic review. So help supplement our review of your transcript and your test scores. And the idea is to broaden the range of people we can bring into the Yale community, and especially for people who maybe have more modest academic profile, gives us more confidence in your performance in the program, and so we can actually be more expansive in who we're bringing in. And that's another reason why don't be too thrown by the class profile or the averages, because we do use the behavioral assessment. It's never a negative. We don't use it to knock anyone down. It's only additive, and it's only for people who maybe have more modest academic profile and do well in the behavioral assessment. That gives us more confidence and allows us to feel good about bringing you into the community, especially for people who have other things that are really we like and we want to have you as part of a Yale SOM.
A good summary of that. I'll lump the two together. Anything to do to prepare for either the video questions or behavioral assessment?
Really not. Certainly for the behavioral assessment, I didn't talk about the specifics, but it's, it's 130 paired statements that describe you, right? So I like a neat desk, or I like to attend meetings, or I like lots of free time, or something. They can be both too positive or too negative. And you just respond quickly. It takes, again, 25 minutes or so. So you respond quickly to those two statements. Which one is more like you? Nothing you can prepare. It's really, you just go fast through those. And it's just your response about you. So nothing. Video questions similarly. I think you might want to think about, like, why do you want to get an MBA? I think there tends to be one behavioral question. So think about past examples of things you've done sort of in teams, like successes, failures, those types of things, just kind of understanding resume and having the kinds of examples you would have for, an MBA interview, which this does not replace. We still do have the interview process, or for a job interview. And then we also will ask a question that maybe, again, gets your thoughts on some things, your personal preferences in terms of, likes, books or music or those types of things. So just to get a little bit more know about you. So nothing you need to prepare for that. One thing I would say is, do not, we often should I write something down, or should I? You don't need to write anything down. And definitely don't, to your statement about using AI. I think you could probably like plug in the question and kind of, have ChatGPT or some other platform, spit out a response. If you look like you're reading, or if you look like you're being very, that we don't need a perfect answer. We're not looking for a perfect answer. We know this is, you have one time chance to respond to this. It's not going to be ideal, but we want an authentic, a true answer from you. So don't read a response. Don't pre-record or kind of write something out. There are some prompts out there. Some are more accurate than others about what we're asking. So we'd rather have the imperfect you as opposed to some perfect someone else.
And I promise you, it's far less subtle than you think it is when you're reading the responses.
Yeah, I think that's
Just
right.
do yourself a favor and just do authentic you in the video questions. All right, so we're truly gonna do speed round here. This is Yale kind of New Haven favorites, and then we'll go into just wrapping up on some of our key themes here. So I'll say each one of these, and then you can respond, and then I'll respond. Sound good?
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. Favorite activity?
Okay. You're first? You respond, then I
No,
respond?
you're first.
I'm
asking
first.
you.
Okay, favorite activity in New Haven. A ton of them, but I do this maybe once every decade, but I like hiking the top of East Rock. That's always a fun activity. Also, Sleeping Giant farther out. So those are always fun hikes. How about you?
Mine's a more regular one. So I have a farmer's market not that far from me on Sundays. And very specifically, I'm a New York native and I love New Haven food, but not New Haven bagels. But the one good New Haven bagel place comes to the farmer's market every week. So I stock up for the week there. Favorite building?
Me, I'm gonna go with the Beinecke Rare Book Library. I just think it's beautiful. I love the books that are in there, but also just the translucent stone when the sun's shining through them is really beautiful. How about you?
Yeah, I'm gonna go nerd too. I'm gonna pick a different library, Sterling Memorial Library, which is literally built like a cathedral and very, very kind of beautiful homage to learning at Yale. Best non-pizza restaurant. It's a very
Yeah.
specific category.
Yeah, and I would say New Haven's a great architecture city for those who care. Non-pizza, I've said this before and I'm going to stick with it. House of Naan, it's the best Indian food in town. The tikka fries are just like super craveable. So I would definitely do that. How about you?
I'm gonna say Camacho Garage, which is a little further afield from Yale campus, but not super far. Good Mexican.
Yeah.
All right. Best coffee.
I'm going to go with coffee with a K and a question mark. Coffee, which is probably one of the closest coffee places to SOM. It's one of the like old, like it's been around forever, but very funky, very fun, and just a good hangout.
Okay, I'm gonna go with pistachio, and specifically the combination of my two favorite foods, coffee and ice cream. They're affogato there, which is just espresso with vanilla ice cream. Like, what could be better? All right. Lastly, and obviously most important for any New Haven list, best pizza.
Yeah, I'm resisting the temptation to give my favorite pizza from each place, which I could easily do, but I'm gonna.
Very limited on time.
Yeah, no, I'm traditionally Pepe's guy, but I'm gonna go for Sally's, and I'm gonna go for Sally's because of the potato and rosemary pizza, which is non-traditional, but I really love.
Okay, I'm gonna go a little bit less standard with bar, which is it's simply called bar. But I like their red pie with hot cherry peppers. All right. More importantly, maybe
Yeah.
let's give maybe not important than pizza, but uh let's try to just wrap up with a few kind of last bits of, as promised, our best application advice heading into this. Bruce, if you want to kick it off.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. And I think this is something you might hear from others, which is be yourself. I think there are a few reasons why that you should do that. Don't try and think about what we're looking for, or try to position yourself based on what you think is going to give you the best chances of being admitted. I think from a very basic perspective, you will be more compelling if you are presenting who you truly are. It's sort of like, as a version of the essays when I was in a sort of, I studied literature and taught it for a little bit. And one of the things we say is like, write about what matters to you, because you're going to write most compellingly about that. And don't try and position yourself to be who you think we want you to be. Just be who you are, and that's going to be your best candidacy.
I think we get a lot of questions around the theme of how can I stand out? How can I make a memorable application? And I would suggest that's really not the right orientation to have. I think it's the same point Bruce is making. Don't worry about what everyone else is doing. Worry about what you know best, which is you. And even if on paper you end up looking fairly similar to another candidate, that's fine. If you both look great, you'll both be admitted. This isn't sort of a contest of standing out. So again, focus more on yourself and presenting the best, the best case scenario of your achievements and your, your accomplishments to date. And that's really where to focus your efforts.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I guess one thing I would also say is really kind of embrace your mistakes. And that obviously you want to present your strongest candidacy, and that usually doesn't mean leading with your mistakes, but maybe building on our conversation about professional gaps, work gaps, unemployment. We will see the warts in your application, and it's better for you to address them, as we say in the law, draw the sting, to address them on your terms, present them, don't hide from them. Again, you're maybe not highlighting them, but we know that there's no perfect candidate. No one is through the roof on every dimension. And you're coming to business school because you want to develop yourself and kind of be a better version of yourself after you graduate than you are now. And so if everybody was already perfect, you wouldn't need business school. So to try and incorporate any sort of your mistakes or kind of soft parts of your application into your profile, that helps contextualize it, helps us make sense of it, helps us get past it.
I would also say follow our lead. So hopefully you've gotten a sense of how thoughtful we try to be in constructing this application, and you have our trust that we're asking you the things that we truly say we're asking you. We don't have some hidden agenda. And so I think the best way to approach that is by, taking that lead and answering what we've asked, not what you wanted us to ask. I mean, I hope you enjoy our application experience. I hope it feels fulfilling to you, but even if it doesn't, we hope you'll go with what we're trying to be transparent and sharing. And hopefully that makes it a more streamlined process for you to not have to cram in all this extraneous information.
Yeah. Yeah. And somewhat to that point, in terms of following our lead, and I've talked earlier about this being a dialogue, use this as an opportunity for self-reflection, introspection, sort of self-assessment. You should, again, know more about yourself after you go through this process than you did before. And the byproduct is you will get into a great school, whether it's here or elsewhere, there you will have options. But really approach it with that mindset and that spirit of kind of introspection, learning about yourself. And I think it will serve you well in the process.
I think maybe I'll close out with maybe a little bit of ironic statement. Don't overthink it. And we've just spent an hour talking about all the minutia here, but I think maybe more accurately, kind of know where to quit. There's no such thing as a perfect application. You need to be effective with your time. There's a lot of things here that you have to complete. You're likely completing more than one business school application, and so just sort of don't second guess and kind of write and rewrite again if it's your essay, and when you've invested enough time in the GMAT, and give yourself sort of the grace to move on and balance sort of the totality of things that you need to do. Your application will be great. We look forward to reading it, and I think hopefully that's a good place for us to end. I don't know, Bruce, if you have any other resources or events that you want to point people towards as a final thought.
Yeah, no, I know we put up the link to to our application guide, which is a great resource. And just to this event, we are recording it. We will share this with everybody. I know you mentioned you're inside the application, literally the event you just had, which is a nice overview as well. And then we do have our Q&As, our workshops, my office hours coming up. So please feel free to sign up for those if you have specific questions as you're putting together your MBA application. We look forward to sort of sharing more and kind of engaging with you in those contexts as well.
Thanks everyone for joining today.
Thanks so much. Have a good day.